Hey everybody, Crazy Kahzmoh here, coming back at you again, and this time I actually do have another new theory for you. It took me a little longer to get this one together, and even after all of the exhaustive work I've done, I still had a monkey wrench thrown into the works at the last minute, which caused me to have to go back and do a little bit more research in order to be able to bring this one to you. Anyway, so without any further ado, this is Crazy Kahzmoh's Dumbledore theory. Now, the whole reason this one came about is I like to read other people's theories online and see what I think about them. And one of the theories that kept popping up every time I read one of the Harry Potter fan pages was the whole theory that Ron Weasley, from the future in his elderly form, is actually Albus Dumbledore. Now, I've read a lot of the information that people use, and there are glaring inconsistencies and holes that just make the whole thing make very little sense to me. So I started thinking about it myself. If I were to guess who that was referenced in the series Albus Dumbledore could possibly be, who would it be from my perspective? And it took me a while to come up with an idea that to me made a little bit of sense. To me, and drum roll please, however you want to put it, I personally believe that Albus Dumbledore is James Potter. I know every one of you right now, or at least a good portion of you, is screaming out about how it's not possible, how there's no possible way that it could be, but I beg you, please, hold off, follow me down the rabbit hole a little bit, and let me explain myself. Now, first thing we got to get out of the way. In order for any theory that Albus Dumbledore was anybody but Albus Dumbledore, there's one major thing we have to accept, and that is that at some point, in either his formative years or later on, the original or prime Albus Dumbledore died, or was in some other way taken out of the equation so another person could take his place. There are a couple different points in history where I guess you could possibly put that switch out in, but I have one very early on that makes the most sense to me. In going back and doing my research about the history of Albus Dumbledore so I could possibly fit all of this theory into it, I found a very, very, very dark moment in his life that actually kind of fits to what I think could have happened to make this theory work. And that is, at a very early age, Albus Dumbledore's younger sister was beaten by a group of muggles for practicing magic in public. After that, his father went crazy, attacked the muggles, and was sent to Azkaban, where he later died. Now, that's a very broad explanation of events. My personal thought is this. His sister wasn't alone practicing magic. She was there with her brother. Since she was a girl, they decided to teach her a lesson. However, when Albus decided to help, he was given the more savage beating, causing him to go into extremely serious distress and later pass on. Now, the father, losing his mind emotionally, goes out and attacks the Muggle children. It makes more sense to me that he would do an attack to the extent at which he came up with after losing a child, not necessarily just having one beaten. Now, I'm not a parent myself, so for any of you parents out there who are going to hold that against me, please understand I'm only adjacent to parenthood. I'm an uncle, not a father. So, now, here's where it gets a little bit sticky. After said attack, when Albus Dumbledore's father knew he was going to be put into Azkaban for what he had done, he went about what I believe to be a somewhat devious and somewhat misguided plan, but he went around memory charming the rest of his family to erase the death of Albus. Because I believe there was a problem with him and grief. I don't think he believed that his wife and family could handle the loss of their son, right? So at this point, he's adjusting their memories to fix the hole left behind by Albus Dumbledore. Now, for a moment, let's put a pin in that and remember, okay, hold on, before I put a pin in it. One last thing. We got to remember that Albus Dumbledore's family, after this event, moved to Godric's Hollow. That's a huge part of how my theory makes sense. Remember that they moved to Godric's Hollow, and I personally believe that the father, knowing he was going to be sent to Azkaban, went ahead to scout out Godric's Hollow and make sure that it would be a safe place for his family to live. Now, put a pin in that. Here's how I explain how James Potter, a 21-year-old man, in the present day, ends up getting together with the Dumbledore family and still at the same time having enough time to create the Dumbledore persona. So, In order for this to work out, you have to understand a little theory from the old Dungeons & Dragons called wild magic. What happened was they had a class that used it, but in most cases wild magic occurred when a spell went haywire. Something went wrong. You used a substandard component. It was something that could be used by game masters to make the game a little bit more fun. And it was a table. And for every spell that went wonky, you had to roll on the table and see what happened. It was different for everybody, and everybody in the room had to roll to see what happened to them. And one of the things on the table was a temporal disturbance. Now, here's how I see the series of events on the evening of the death of Harry's parents. We have a problem, or at least I see a problem, in that it follows what I like to call the comic book rule. Characters who die off screen can never be considered to be dead unless you actually watch it happen. Now, in every version of the death scene of Harry's parents that I can find, at least from what I see of it, we never actually hear the words Avada Kedavra used when the spell is cast at James. We see it multiple times done to Harry's mother, Lily, and we watch the life flood out of her eyes, right? We all know that moment. It's heart-wrenching. But at that point, James is laying crumpled in a heap on the floor as he walks over and attempts the spell on Harry. Now, this is when the spell rebounds, right? We all know what happened. Voldemort's body is destroyed by the spell, but magic doesn't just attack one target. When it rebounds everywhere. So we've got James in a crumpled heap on the floor, who also has to make a quote-unquote save against wild magic for the rebounding spell, and has a totally different effect happen to him. My personal belief is when the spell rebounded, instead of destroying him, which he was already close to death from whatever spell was used by Voldemort, when the spell rebounded and hit the spell that had already been cast on him, the two magics rebounded a second time and caused him to be pulled back in time. Now, temporal disturbances do not create physical space disturbances. So when he was pulled back in time, he was pulled back temporally, but not physically. So he stayed in Godric's Hollow. He just ended up back several years in the past, coinciding perfectly with the moment that I asked you guys to hold a pin in, where Dumbledore's father decided to scout and find a place for his family to move to, knowing that the disgrace was going to follow them just about anywhere. So here is an emotionally distraught man who has just witnessed the death of his son, not his only son, but witnessed the death of his son, and has already proven himself to be good with memory charms. So instead of leaving that charm up, he reorchestrates the memory charm to have James take the place of Albus Dumbledore. Now, I know there's a big, huge discrepancy here, which is Albus was very young at the time that I'm saying he died, and James was 21. Now, my personal belief is when James was sent back in time, he was not in good shape. He wasn't exactly a spring chicken. He wasn't feeling well. He was next to death's door. I mean, as close as you can get without actually being there. And being sent through time staved off the process, but didn't stop it entirely. So when he's found by Albus's father, he is in bad shape. Worse than any normal magic can cure. However, there is one major form of magic that we all know about, and who happened to end up being a friend of the Dumbledore family, that could heal him, which is the Elixir of Life created by the Sorcerer/Philosopher's Stone, which was created by Nicholas Flamel. Now, whether it was that the Dumbledore family already knew him, or whether they met him from this particular instance, it stands to reason that anyone who is as powerful a wizard as Nicholas Flamel was would have had to have some reason to end up friends with the Dumbledore family, and as close as he was with the Dumbledore family, to explain their secret. Now, the one thing that's never been explained to any major degree is what the Sorcerer's Stone Elixir of Life would do to somebody who was already young. Used to heal his wounds, yes, but what does it do to a 21-year-old man who's still in the prime of his life to drink the Elixir of Life, which grants extra youth from what I understand of it? So my theory is that when it was used by him to heal his wounds, it also reduced his age again, thus giving Albus's father the idea to pass him off as his son. Now, for some reason, I'm guessing proximity, or I'm guessing maybe he has a mental resistance to it, Aberforth always knew That's a big part of my theory. Aberforth always knew that Albus was not actually, that this version of Albus was not actually his brother. Whatever he may, how much of the truth he actually knew is kind of a gray area for me, but it makes a lot of sense to me that would explain a lot of the venom that he uses when talking about Dumbledore. And imagine, especially every time that Harry calls Dumbledore a friend, Aberforth makes mention of, oh, your friend. He's very, very, very vocal about it every time Harry uses that word. It takes on a little bit of a stranger tone if you think, or a little bit more of a deep tone if you think of the possibility that Dumbledore is actually James Potter masquerading as someone else and refusing to tell Harry. So now, we've got Dumbledore Sr. has given the elixir of life to James Potter and made him younger, and is now passing him off in Godric's Hollow as Harry Potter. Now, as Albus Dumbledore. Now, he knows a portion of what's going to happen in the future. He knows a lot of the events of Dumbledore's life as told to him by the biographies or other things that he would have read. However, he loses all knowledge of what happens the moment that Harry is attacked. Now, we all know that there was a theory that Neville Longbottom could have been the Chosen One, and that it was only due to certain actions that were taken by the people involved that made Voldemort choose Harry. If, temporally speaking, it had already been Harry in the first place, and this version of Dumbledore, who is James Potter, knew that Harry was the one attacked, it would make perfect sense that he would spend his entire life setting up events to make sure that it happened again, exactly the way it happened the first time. Now, another part of this theory that really kind of endears itself to me. We know through flashbacks that James Potter, the version of James Potter originally seen in the series, was not a very nice person to one particular character, Severus Snape. He was merciless, made fun of him, used magic to tease him, all of that. Now think about it this way. Imagine that Albus Dumbledore, the kind man who always had Snape's back, was actually James Potter, and now had a chance to see what Snape had gone through, and therefore had the ability to go back and reinvent his relationship with him and give him the trust and the respect he never was able to give him the first time. It's kind of a cool little thing, don't you think? Now, there is a major hole that I had to fill in this theory. In Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire, both James and Lily Potter appear out of Voldemort's wand during their big showdown at the end of the movie. And I was stumped, trying to figure out exactly how that could work. Now, personally, it could be a little bit of a stretch, but personally, I think there are two possible explanations. The first is actually given by Dumbledore himself, which is when he tells Harry that not even magic can bring back the dead. So it's a possibility that the three apparitions that Harry saw in that confrontation were simply memories of people who had been attacked by that wand. Wands also, as far as I know, are not all-knowing nor all-powerful. Even the Elder Wand had limitations. So when James was vanished from the timeline and moved back, it was as if he died. He ceased to exist. Therefore, either one of those possibilities could explain why an apparition of James Potter appeared from the wand. The other possibility that I've been toying with, and that's been going through my head, is this is not the first time that Harry has seen his parents when he most needed to. He was addicted for a long time to the Mirror of Erised for that specific reason. It showed him what he most wanted in the world, which was his parents. So it's not hard to conceive of a possibility of his wand, or even the linking of the two wands, giving him exactly what he needed at that moment in order to allow him to move forward, to do what he needed to do. Either way, I don't personally believe that that James Potter was technically dead at that point. However, personally for me, and this is where my whole concept of the theory came from, the most damning piece of evidence that says to me that Dumbledore and James Potter are the same person it occurs at the very end of the final Harry Potter movie. Harry has decided that he needs to die. He's finally seen the Pensieve memories. Ooh, that's another point. For those of you who want to make reference to the point that wizards must have protections against memory charms, I would reference to you Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets, in which Gilderoy Lockhart takes the credit for how many great wizards' exploits simply by making them forget that they ever did them. Now, these are great and powerful wizards, so it stands to reason that if they were able to fall prey to that, young wizards, and especially muggles, as I believe Dumbledore's mother was, would be extremely susceptible to memory charms. Number 2, legilimency. Certainly someone must have checked Dumbledore's brain at some point to see what he was thinking. One of the Death Eaters must have come after him. Well, why were there no memories of him being James Potter? That's why this whole point popped back into my mind. The Pensieve. We see several times the use of the Pensieve for him to take memories out of his head that he wants to remember and hold them in a place where they never degrade. Now, it's never explained exactly how those work. He knows and has knowledge of the memories, but how much of them does he actually quote-unquote remember? Or is it more like he saved it in a file and knows what's in the file, but you're not going to be able to steal that information out of his head because it's not there? If it's the latter of the two, it explains a lot as to how he went through life and was able to foment this massive conspiracy of being somebody other than who he was. He just simply removed any memory that had any chance of possibly connecting him as James Potter and hid it in the Pensieve. It may be a little bit of a reach, but no more than Ron Weasley being Albus Dumbledore. Now, back to the point I was trying to make earlier, which is the biggest piece of and most damning piece of evidence that I personally believe points to Dumbledore and James Potter being the very same person. At the end of Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows Part 2, Harry has decided he needs to die. He's seen the memory, he knows that that is what he is destined for. So, he is marching on his way to his death. He opens the golden snitch, which opens at the close, and he gets the Sorcerer's Stone. When he holds it, the apparitions of every single family member, or every single person important to him, appears except one. Dumbledore. Harry sees James, he sees Lily, he sees Sirius, he even sees Remus, he sees Tonks. The only person, and the most important person next to Sirius to him in his life, who had just died, does not appear from beyond the veil to see him off. Now, you could say that he's waiting for Harry to die to see him in the Beyond place. Well, he even states that that's more of a memory left for Harry. The Spirit should have shown, and that's why I believe he did. I personally believe the reason why you don't see an apparition of Dumbledore is the Star Wars effect. Just like when they re-released the movies, or even when they released it in the first place, when Darth Vader comes back as a Force Phantom, he is not trashed, he's not destroyed, he's not scarred, he is Anakin Skywalker again. And that is what I believe happened when Albus Dumbledore died. That's personally why I think Albus had to die when he did, was simply so that James Potter could be there when Harry was about to go meet his end, because he knew if he was still alive as Dumbledore, when Harry went to meet his end, that one person would be very missing from that encounter, and that he needed desperately for that encounter to take place just that way, because that was the spur that Harry needed to do what he needed to do. The other thing, and this is just to kind of add to that makes me really like this theory, is simply what James Potter says to him in that specific scene. When Harry asks his parents, "Will you stay with me?" James says to him, "Till the very end." After he dies and goes to the Beyond Place, Dumbledore is the one waiting for him. He is the one who stays with Harry until the very end. So, from all these reasons that I've just given you guys, I personally think James Potter, a man displaced in time through a really badly rebounded curse, comes to a family in the grip of emotional ruin, who, with the use of a couple of memory charms that are, let's face it, on the border of right and wrong, gets sent into that family after being sent back in time, forced back into an adolescent's body, and to live a life that he knows isn't his. I mean, you even have, later on, accidents, quote-unquote, that happen to both his mother and his sister. Now, I could do a little bit more research into what those accidents were, but personally, what the accidents were, to me, is not as important as the fact that they're described as accidents. So, we have this man who has spent his entire life preparing for a moment that defines everything. He takes Harry under his wing. He acts like a father to him at any time, any point that he can. And then at the most convenient moment, when it is most necessary for Harry that he not be there, he leaves. He dies. A father's love. It could also, if you think about it, if you really want to stretch the bounds of what is and is not possible, if Dumbledore in his mind firmly believed he was dying to save Harry, it could be entirely possible that he was attempting to put the same charm on Harry, or of protection, that was put by Lily Potter's sacrifice in the first place. But that's reaching slightly. Anyways, I really hope you guys enjoyed this. It took a little bit of a darker turn than I was really hoping for, but, you know, what can you do? You have to use the facts that are presented to you. Hopefully you guys enjoy this, and if you do, hit the like button, hit the share button, and hopefully enough of you guys will show interest that I can keep doing these. So until then, Crazy Kahzmoh, signing off.